to talk about Israel and Jerusalem, and I want to, honestly, tonight, the main focus, I want us to pray for Israel. I want us to pray for Jerusalem. I know a couple weeks ago we started a new Bible study there in the book of Jude, and we're going to just take a time out from that tonight because I think this is so important. I think God instructs us to pray for Jerusalem, pray for the peace of Jerusalem, and we want to do that tonight. I want to just kind of, if I can, with the help of the Lord, educate you a little bit on what's kind of going on over there, what it means as far as just world events, but also what it means prophetically speaking, because this does have prophetic meaning behind it. So goes Israel, so goes the world, and you better keep your eyes on Israel and stuff. So no doubt it's got prophetic meaning what's going on this week. I've been trying to stay up to date as much as I can on it, watch updates, read articles, and things like that. Of course, be careful who you watch and listen on stuff like that, because there's some people that are pro-Israel and there's some people that are anti-Israel and stuff. So, you know, depending on how it's written by who, it can sway one way or the other. But tonight we're going to look at it from a biblical sense and just kind of educate you just a little bit, hopefully, Lord willing, here. And go ahead and open your Bibles up. We're going to start right here at the beginning. We're going to look at just a few things, talk about a few things. And then here, after we just talk about a little bit regarding what's going on over there in Israel and Jerusalem there, we're going to gather together here in front of the church and pray. And we're going to pray for Israel, of course, like I said, but we're also going to lift Dicey up in prayer and pray for her and the surgery in the morning. That's how we opened our service this morning, was praying for Dicey. And listen, I believe God honors that. But tonight, if you have your Bibles with you, go ahead and open up to the book of Genesis. So we're going to start for just a moment. We're going to look at just a few things. We're going to go just a couple of different places in the Bible. And really, we could take this and study several weeks on it. And like I said, tonight we're just kind of taking a time out from Jude. I want to get back into the book of Jude because it is relevant to what's happening today in our church world and around the world, really. But and of course, Jude's a very short book. You know, there's not many verses, but we are going to get through that book and complete that book as well. And then we'll see where the Lord leads from there. I know a few of you told me last week, or a week before, you tricked me. I thought you was going here, I thought you was going there. And Faye, she said, I thought you was going to a different book. I'm not going to say what book we talked about because it may be next. But I've been trying to pray and get what the Lord wants for us. But like I said, this week I just felt burdened to have a special service tonight focused on Israel and stuff, because I love Israel. I love the people over there, and I think we should. We should have a burden for them, have a burden for that nation. It's God's chosen people. Whether the world wants to recognize that or not, it is. And I'm thankful for it. But in Genesis chapter number 12, starting verse number 1, it says, Now the Lord had said unto Abram, Get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house, unto a land that I will show thee. I like that, don't you? God says, I'll show you the land. And then he says, And I will make of thee a what? Great nation. He said, I'll make thee a great nation, and I will bless thee, and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curseth thee. I believe that promise and those verses are as relevant today as they were when they were written. I do. I believe if you support Israel, if you stand by Israel's side, if you help them, if you stand for them, guess what? God's going to bless you. It's because of these verses right here. It's a promise God has given us. If you bless them, I'll bless you. If you curse them, I curse you. And you can look throughout history, and we're not going to really get into that tonight, but you can look throughout history and see nations that came against Israel and see how it turned out for them. It didn't turn out too well. Some of those nations are no longer in existence today. Many of them are not. And then you have a lot of nations over there in the Middle East and stuff that that don't have anything, because why? They are an enemy of Israel. I firmly believe, I've said it for many years, I firmly believe that God has blessed the United States of America over the years because America has stood by Israel's side. And one thing that I have been very burdened about this past week is the silence from America. Now, I know there's been a few statements made and a few things said, but not much action. Not much things in the news, not much things have been said really that has been in support of Israel like I feel that it should be. And that worries me for us as a whole, for us as a country and stuff. But I believe just as Truman, back years ago when Truman, the United States recognized Israel, 1948, and the Bible tells us that nation be born in a day. Guess what it was? The nation of Israel came about in one day. And, of course, the world hated that. But the United States declared it. And they recognized them with a few other allies and stuff. And I'm thankful that they did. And I believe we have been blessed because of that. And we see that. But now I want you to go over to the book of Psalm 122, go over there for just a few moments. I want to give you some information, if I may, tonight, and we're going to look at just a few things. And one thing I found interesting is actually right now, this evening in New York City, in the United States of America here, there's actually a meeting happening tonight at the UN to discuss what is going on in Israel. This is actually the third meeting, believe it or not. You don't really hear much about it, but this is actually the third meeting the UN has had this week regarding this conflict. And the other two meetings were actually behind closed doors. I don't know what was said, what happened, but the other two meetings were closed doors, but tonight's meeting has actually been open and stuff. I don't know if we'll hear anything out of it or not, but the UN, as you know, I'm not a fan of that and stuff. The UN, I think that is nothing more than the one world government as far as conditioning the world for that and leading up to that and things like that. It's a mess if you really study it out and see it. And you can quickly see that the UN is ultimately not in favor of Israel. They're not really fans of them. But there is a meeting going on tonight in New York City regarding what is going on in Israel. And I want to say, no matter what the news outlets, reporters say, Israel is defending itself. That's what they are doing. They are defending itself, and they have a right to defend themselves. And I'm thankful for that. And, of course, I'm thankful for some of the allies. It was surprising that some of the allies actually are flying the Israeli flag right now. Some of these names surprise me. Germany is flying an Israel flag in their home country, the Czech Republic, Ukraine, and Austria. All four of those are actually flying an Israel flag right now tonight in their capital in support of Israel. Now, when you think about it, you just don't think of those countries necessarily supporting Israel and stuff. But we know prophetically, from a prophetic standpoint, how things are going to shape up and go, and we'll talk more about that in just a little bit. But I do find it interesting. I don't know if you've heard or not, but the IDF, when I say IDF, I'm talking about Israeli Defense Force, okay? They have called this operation Guardian of the Walls. That is what this is called, is Guardian of the Walls, and they are protecting themselves, guarding themselves. And Jerusalem, literally the word Jerusalem means foundation of peace. That's what it means, foundation of peace. And of course we know that the city has been a city that has been a center of conflict for many years. We know that. But in Psalm 122, in verse number 1, it says, I was glad when they said unto me, let us go into the house of the Lord. Our feet shall stand within thy gates. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem is builded as a city that is compact together, whither the tribes go up, the tribes of the Lord, unto the testimony of Israel, to give thanks unto the name of the Lord. For there are set thrones of judgment, The thrones of the house of David. I love verse number 6. Notice this. It says, pray for the peace of Jerusalem. They shall prosper that what? Love thee. It says, peace be within thy walls and prosperity within thy palaces. For my brethren and companions' sake, I will now say, peace be within thee. Because of the house of the Lord our God, I will seek thy good. Notice what it says there, verse number 6, the key verse of this chapter, if I could say it that way. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. They shall prosper that love thee. I hope that you love Jerusalem tonight. I hope that you love Israel tonight. I hope that you have that. And listen, it says pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And we know, prophetically speaking, as we've studied Revelation, there can be no real peace in Jerusalem or even on earth until the Prince of Peace reigns on David's throne. We know that. We know that there'll be a peace treaty signed as far as the 7-year tribulation period goes, but we know that that's a false peace. It's not real peace. As I said this morning, the only place that there's peace right now is in heaven. Jesus made that clear. He's like, in heaven is the only place where there's peace right now. There's not peace in our communities, in our states, in our countries. Anywhere in this world, there's no peace right now. It's only found in heaven. So we know that there will never really be any real peace on earth until the Prince of Peace will come and reign. We know that will happen one day. But the way this verse was written, the way this chapter was written, when we pray for the peace of Jerusalem, we are actually praying, thy kingdom come. That's what we're praying, thy kingdom come. We're praying, even so come, Lord Jesus. We're praying that prayer. When we pray for the peace of Jerusalem, we know they will never really get true peace until the Prince of Peace is here. Until that takes place. Because remember, what they think is peace the first time is a false peace. It's the Antichrist. But we are really praying thy kingdom come, as Jesus wrote, or as Jesus spoke over in Matthew penned down, and then in Revelation, we studied it just a few weeks ago over in Revelation 22:20. It says, even so come, Lord Jesus. Even so come, Lord Jesus. Listen, do you realize that Jesus, he wept over the city of Jerusalem? He cried tears. He wept over the city of Jerusalem. Why? Because they were ignorant of the peace that God could give them. Because he had that for them, and they didn't accept it. They rejected their own. They rejected their own. He came into his own what? Received him not. They rejected. He cried, he wept over the city of Jerusalem. I noticed in this verse, in this chapter 122 of Psalm here, notice the different fruits of the Spirit that we can see in this psalm. Notice in verse number 1 it says, I was glad. That gladness can also be translated there to be joy. We see joy. And then you go down to verse number 6, 7, and 8. It says, pray for the peace of Jerusalem, and they shall prosper that what love thee. Peace be within thy walls, and prosperity within thy palaces. For my brethren and companions' sake, I will now say, peace be within thee. Right here in this one chapter, we see love, joy, and peace, all called out in Psalm 122. Those are fruits of the Spirit that we see over the New Testament. We see that called out here. Notice 3 times in verse 6, 7, 8, we see peace, peace, peace. We see that. You know what ultimately the people over there are wanting? They're wanting peace. They're wanting peace. It has broke my heart this past week, some of the images I've seen. I showed Dora a video just the other day. A man driving down the road with his newborn baby in the back seat had to pull over and hunker down with that baby, got the baby out of the car, and they got down behind these barricades as he was protecting his newborn because the sirens were going off. We know, I don't know if you saw the little boy in Israel that passed away because a rocket went into his bedroom innocent. We see people that, I don't know if you saw the images or not, from the hospital there in Israel and stuff, the hospital where all the newborn babies are born. When all the sirens started ringing, guess what? Those doctors and nurses, they went in there and they grabbed every baby up out of the crib and they went to the hallways and they was holding them, hunkered down. I mean, think about that. They want to live in peace. They want that. But some of the images have been so disturbing, and some of the things just literally break your heart. You see the way the kids are affected. What's going on over there? And I thank God that Israel, that they are protecting themselves, because it could be so much worse. It could be so much worse. They are protecting themselves. We know that God's protecting them. We know that. But we also, I looked before I came here, and the information I got was 3 hours old when I showed up here. So it might be more now. But as of just this past week, already at this moment in time, there's been over 3,000 rockets that have been fired from Gaza into Israel. Over 3,000 rockets. I don't know if you've seen some of the images. And the thing that amazes me is the Iron Dome system that Israel has. And I don't know if you know much about that and stuff. We might even talk about that one of these days, because really that is biblical and stuff. But Israel, they have an Iron Dome. They're the only nation in the world that has this technology. And when a rocket is fired from an enemy toward Israel, toward Jerusalem, any of them, the Iron Dome will actually pick up that rocket, and it can tell its velocity, its speed, where it's heading. It can tell if that rocket's going to fall off somewhere in desert territory or out into the water. It won't worry about those. But if there's any that is coming toward people, coming toward land, coming toward infrastructure, guess what? They will fire an interceptor rocket, and it will blow it up in midair. And you could see the stuff this past week literally just blowing up in midair, one right after the other. And the Iron Dome, as of right now, it has a 95% effect rate. I mean, it's amazing the technology Israel has. And that's thanks to God. That's thanks. Listen, Israel is more advanced than any other nation in the world, whether you realize it or not, but yet it's so small. But I'm thankful that God doesn't look at numbers. He doesn't look at the size of the land mass and stuff like that. I mean, Israel is such a small country. I was talking to a friend of mine this past week that's actually been there. A fighter jet plane can actually fly across the entire country with just normal cruise speed in 5 minutes. I mean, it's tiny. It's small. But over 3,000 rockets have been fired from Gaza into Israel. And I didn't realize this until I started studying into it and everything, but I didn't realize that any new homes that are built over there from 1991 until now, if you go over there to build a home or anything, every home has to have a bomb shelter. And from the Gulf War, from 1991 to now, every home that's been built has a bomb shelter in it, every single one of them. It's just unbelievable, the things, but thank God for His hand of protection on them. But listen, we are to pray for their peace. We are to pray for that country, and I'm thankful that we're able to do that. And like I said, it's called Guardian of the Walls. That is the name of the operation that we're seeing. And just to give you a little bit of information regarding this, you've probably heard on the news Hamas. That's what they call it. And Hamas is nothing more than a terrorist organization, okay? And the video, it may not get posted tonight. I don't know from things I'm saying, but it is what it is. It is a terrorist organization. Just to give you a little bit of information about Hamas, it is a Palestinian, Sunni Islamic fundamentalist, but it has a militant group and nationalist organization. It was founded back in 1987, but you're really just hearing a lot about it now. And its headquarters is found in Gaza, in the Gaza Strip. A lot of times it's referred to as, and that of course is the area that is being bombed, the area that is being hit by Israel the hardest. And they aim to liberate Palestine from the Israeli occupation and transform the country into an Islamic state. That is their ultimate goal. They want Israel gone. They want to turn it into an Islamic state. I said it many times back when we did our Revelation study. I believe that the religion of Islam is certainly going to play a major factor in end-time prophecy. I believe Islam and the Catholic Church together is going to play a huge role in the one world religion. I believe that. But Hamas, what they are ultimately looking for is to be put on the news. They're looking for PR victory. Remember, Hamas themselves is not necessarily a country. They are just a group of radicals, a group of people, a terrorist organization that is trying to eliminate Israel as much as they know how, trying to do things. And what they want to do ultimately is get it up on the news that Hamas has crippled Israel or brought Israel to its knees. And if a small terrorist organization is able to do that, then how powerful are they? And wants to bring other nations against Israel. That is their ultimate goal. But there's also another group of people, too, that you have to pay attention to, and it's called Hezbollah. I don't know if you've heard of that group as well, but Hezbollah is another group that you have to look at. Because why? Because Hezbollah is actually the role model to the Hamas organization. That is where they look to and say, I want to be like them. It's a big brother to them, and Hezbollah is a role model to Hamas in terms of its military, political, and media operations. And the two groups share common tactics, common goals. They also share a lot of the same ties to a nation called Iran. And a lot of people have taken their eyes kind of off of Iran, but Iran, I believe, is behind the scenes doing a lot of what is happening right now over in the Middle East. Because Iran's leader himself said he wanted to wipe Israel off the map. He said that just a few years ago. But Hezbollah is a Lebanese Shia Islamist political party and militant group. So Hezbollah mainly is based out of Lebanon. We know that Lebanon and all those countries over there like that absolutely hate Israel. They hate the United States too, but they hate Israel. It's an enemy of Israel, Lebanon and Iran and Syria and all those countries over there. But we see Hezbollah and Hamas, both of those are terrorist organizations that are going after Israel. Most all the rockets fired into Israel have came from Gaza. But there have also been some rockets this past week that have came out of Lebanon. There's been some rockets come out of Syria. So they have been coming from some other different directions, but most, not over 90%, have been coming out of the Gaza Strip, out of Gaza there. And of course, we know that Israel, they are defending themselves, and they are going after all of Hamas's infrastructure. They are wanting to take down their towers. See what happens, the difference between these groups is Israel. You have the Israeli military out front fighting and protecting, and their citizens behind them that they are shielding. Whereas with Hezbollah and Hamas and those groups in Gaza, guess what they're doing? They're putting the women and the children in front of them, and they're putting the citizens in front of them, and they're saying, we're behind them, and we're pointing the gun at you with them in front of us. That's what they're doing. And Israel, just to tell you kind of how Israel does and how they try to give people a chance, is they actually do a thing called knocking on the door. I don't know if you've heard of this or not or before, but I studied it this past week, and I heard about it again this evening, but it's called knocking on the door. And what they do, listen, they're not out. Israel's not out to kill all these people, but what they want to do is cripple the terrorist organization, take away their infrastructure, take away the military things. So what they do is they will actually go to those high towers. You've probably seen some of the stuff on Facebook this week. Hamas will operate out of these tall towers in Gaza. And those tall towers are filled with civilians. They're filled with men and women and media outlets and different things like that, but they will position their offices, their areas that they work from, all through those towers in different areas and different levels. Why? Because they ain't going to get taken down alone. They want to take everybody with them and all that. But what Israel does is they do a knocking on the door. One of the main aircraft in Israel is an F-16. And they will fly that over and drop a tiny little, what looks to be a smoke bomb, out of that onto the roof of a building, off of a tower. And that actually signifies and lets everybody know in that tower that that building is getting ready to get blown up. Israel is being a gentleman about this, if I could say it that way, but they do what they call knocking on the door. They will drop that smoke bomb down, and once people see the smoke, they know that they've got anywhere from 30 to 45 seconds, or sometimes several minutes, to get out of the building. If not, the building's going to be blown up. After that warning time period is up, then Israel will come in. They will fire actual missiles into the building and take it down. But that's why there's been so few casualties taking place in Gaza, is because Israel has let them know, I'm getting ready to take this down. I'm getting ready to take this down. That's why you've not seen a ton of casualties throughout this, is because of the way Israel is handling it. And they're doing things the right way and trying, because why? Because they do have a heart for other people. They do want peace. They do care about those women and those children and stuff that those terrorist organizations are hiding behind. They're trying to do it the right way. And of course, the world today, they will label Israel as evil for doing that, or blowing up those towers, and that's where civilians work. And like I said, depending on who writes the article and where you read it, it will either be pro-Israel or anti-Israel. It will be one or the other. But listen, I'm thankful tonight that God has his hand on Israel. He has a shield of protection over Israel. Listen, we call it an Iron Dome, but I tell you what, it's God that is protecting Jerusalem tonight. And he's the one that gave the technology. He's the one that gave the infrastructure and everything for Israel to be able to do what they're doing. And we, one thing that bothers me, I guess, about it so bad too, is we know where, and it's even been said on many news outlets and stuff, Hamas, the terrorist organization, along with Hezbollah, both of them are getting a lot of their weapons from Iran. It's public knowledge. We know that. We're getting a lot. They are getting a lot of their weapons from Iran. One thing that bothers me so bad about that is I know in the back of my mind how much money the United States has sent Iran. And that bothers me. Why? Because that, in my mind, puts blood on our hands as a country. I mean, during the Obama era, I'll say it, they sent a ton of money, $1.7 billion to Iran, $400 million in cash on pallets on private unmarked planes. So all of a sudden, all these terrorist organizations have all these weapons and rockets. It's not by accident. The stimulus package everybody loved that they got there a few months ago, at 1.some trillion. You know how many millions went to Iran for COVID relief? See, listen, Satan, he's plotting. But listen, but God ultimately is moving all the chess pieces around. And he's putting everything in perfect place and perfect order for his return. I believe that. Why is the conflict in Jerusalem and Israel so big right now? Because they haven't had a skirmish like this in over 7 years. And there's been a lot of firepower, a lot of rockets, a lot of things happened. What I believe ultimately is happening over there is they're going to be fighting and fighting. And who knows how long it's going to go on for, but ultimately what they're going to be wanting is they're going to be wanting peace. They're going to be looking for someone to come in and say, who can fix this situation? Who can fix this problem? And guess what they're going to do? They're going to welcome the Antichrist right in. And they're going to say, this guy, he can bring peace in this region. He can bring peace to this area like it's never been seen before. He can help us. I believe with all my heart that person will come out of the European Union. I believe that. Biblically, there's a lot of verses that point to that, but I believe it will come out of that. And whether that's United Nations, the EU, whatever, I don't know how it's all going to work out, but I believe it's going to be somebody that steps up and say, guess what? I can fix this. And people are going to be so ready for that peace and so much wanting that peace, they're going to accept the Antichrist. They're going to say, he can fix it. And it's sad, but it's got to happen. It's a must. It's a must, and we know that it's going to happen. But we need to be praying for the peace of Jerusalem. Even so, come, Lord Jesus. We need to be praying that prayer. But we also need to be praying that God will open many of those people's eyes and show them the truth and reveal truth to them. Now, I'm thankful that the tribulation, we know it's a time of Jacob's trouble. We know that it's going to be God's way of judging Israel and his people to bring them back to him. And if you study the Word of God from Genesis to Revelation, as one preacher put it, I read one time, he said, Israel and God is almost like a yo-yo. They go far away from each other, and then they come right back. They go far away and come right back. And it's true, they do. You see that. You see Israel as a nation go from God, they get close to God, they go away from God, they come close to God. And listen, he's going to use that time period, time of Jacob's trouble. He's going to use that and bring his people back to him. And there's going to be repentance. There's going to be people saved. I'm thankful for that. And listen, I'm thankful for the Jewish people that are saved tonight, that do know truth, that do understand and know, hey, Messiah has already come. See, most of the Jewish nation is looking for the Messiah to come. They don't realize that he came the first time. That's what they're praying for on the Wailing Wall. One of the things that is constant prayer there is praying for the Messiah to come. Well, who are they going to see as that Messiah, unfortunately? The Antichrist. They're also at that Wailing Wall praying for a temple to be rebuilt. We know that that's in the works, that is coming. Listen, we are closer than ever, I believe, to that temple being rebuilt. Do you realize that the furniture for the new temple has already been built? Do you know it's already been built and it's in place and ready? Just as soon as that temple's built, that furniture's going in. It's ready. That's how close we are. They're also at that Wailing Wall right now tonight praying for another thing called peace. Those are three main things that the Jewish people, the rabbis are there, they are praying at the Wailing Wall is peace, the coming Messiah, and the temple to be rebuilt. That's what they're praying for. But I'm thankful for the Jewish people that do know the truth, that they do understand, hey, the Messiah has come, and they've accepted Jesus as their Lord and Savior. I'm thankful for that. And there's many that are that way, but there's many that are not. And we know what's to come. We know what's going to happen. The population of Israel is booming. We know that one of the prophecies in Ezekiel and stuff tells us that the Jewish people will come back home. Guess what? People are going back home to Jerusalem faster now than they ever have in history. Do you realize that in 1948, when Israel was put back on the map, when it was established as a nation, there was 650,000 Jews that lived in the nation of Israel. 650,000 right off the bat in 1948. The way the population is trending and growing right now, we are already in the millions. And one study that I looked at said that if time continues on and you get to 2065, which I'm not so sure we make it there, but if you get to 2065, the estimated population of Jewish people in Israel at that time would be 20 million. 20 million Jews. Listen, there's a prophecy in Ezekiel that talks about the Jewish people going back home. And we are seeing that in our day and time right now. We are seeing people go back home. One preacher that actually goes to Jerusalem quite often, he was at the Wailing Wall, and he told the story how he saw a man and his son praying there at the Wailing Wall, and he asked him, he said, "Where are you from?" He said, "I'm from New York City." He said, "We just moved back here." He said, "Well, why did you move back?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I can't really explain it. It just felt like it's time to come home." And that was the response he gave. Listen, that prophecy is being fulfilled in our lifetime right now. Listen, in 1948, I believe that started the clock to the end of time. I believe that's why, because the nation of Israel was rebirthed. It was put back on the map. And that started the prophetic clock of the end of times. And how close are we? I don't know, but what I will say is keep your eye on Israel. Keep your eye on Israel, because there's a lot happening over there right now. And Jerusalem, all that stuff going on over there. Listen, do you realize that Hamas, the terrorist organization, they have fired rockets directly at Jerusalem. They have fired rockets directly at Tel Aviv. the capital city there, where the main hubs and airports and all that stuff are. I'm thankful that just a few years ago and stuff that the United States Embassy moved to Jerusalem, recognized Jerusalem. That was a great thing. I'm thankful for that. But there's been over 3,000 rockets sent into Jerusalem, into Israel, and thank God for the Iron Dome and His hand of protection over them and what's going on. But it breaks my heart for those people over there. I personally have never been to Israel. I hope to go one of these days. I know right now going there is an impossibility pretty much with what else going on. And I wouldn't want to go there right now anyway in the middle of that. But I've seen it through eyes of faith. I've seen it through eyes of faith. I mean, stuff I've studied, stuff I've looked at, pictures and things like that. Listen, my heart breaks for those people over there and what they're going through, the sirens they're hearing, the children, what they're going through, and the fear, the bomb shelters, all that stuff. But David made it clear in Psalm 122, pray for the peace of Jerusalem, that they shall prosper that love thee. Listen, I hope that you love them tonight. And I believe it's our duty as a church, as a Bible-believing church, as Christians today, to pray for Israel, to pray for what's going on over there. And like I said, the way that was written, when we pray that, we're literally praying, thy kingdom come, thy will be done. I love that. Revelation 22:20 says, even so come, Lord Jesus. Even so come, Lord Jesus. Listen, He could literally come back tonight. He could. He could come back tomorrow. He could come back next week. Don't know. Even the angels don't know when He's coming back. I mean, that fascinates me to think, that He's kept that to Himself like that. And He's you know why He's done that? Because He knows how we are. And He knows if I give you a date, you're going to live however you want to up until the day before, and then you're going to try to get right with me. That's exactly why. But listen, it goes back to Jewish tradition, the wedding and stuff like that. Listen, you didn't know when they were coming. The bride had to always be ready. You didn't know when that groom was going to show up. And listen, we need to be ready. We need to be ready. And tonight, I just wanted to give you some information regarding what's going on over there. It's an ever-changing story. New developments all the time. But ultimately, tonight I felt led that we need to pray for the nation of Israel. Pray for Jerusalem. And just as the Bible tells us to do. And not only do that, but lift others up in prayer as well. Dicey, breaks my heart for her. And then, of course, Sherry, still recovering. And I know this just adds so much on her and others. And Jan, how is Tom doing? Not well.
He's